Hey y'all, Vazen's here to kick off 2020 with an exciting review. Today, we're talking about the Vazen 40mm Anamorphic. Vazen is a company based in Hong Kong, and they first reviewed the lens to the world at 2019's Cinegear. This is a fully closed lens. Call it Cine if you like, as it has everything a Cine lens usually has. 40mm is a very versatile focal length, and it allowed me to do close-ups and establishing shots alike.
All things are possible. That's what they told me when I was young. All things are possible. That's what they told me when I was young. All things are possible. That's what they told me when I was young.
The Vazen 40mm comes in a hard case, which makes it safer during shipping and makes it easier to transport it onto set and off set. The lens weighs 1.8 kilograms or 4 pounds, which is quite heavy, and it measures 17.5 centimeters or 7 inches from mount to front. Construction is super solid, and I'd actually love if this was a little bit lighter. Iris ranges from T2 to T16, and focus comes down to 0.8 meters or 2'7" in about 300 degrees of throw. Markings display focus distance in feet and feature bright orange color. Both focus and iris rings are buttery smooth and geared for motors. Oh, and the lens doesn't change size while focusing, and the front doesn't rotate. I love these things. The front of the lens has a 95mm outer diameter, which is compatible with lots of clip-on matte boxes. The downside is the lens has no filter threads. Vazen offers an attachment on their website that gives you 95mm threads for $50. With 10 minutes of modeling, I 3D printed my own attachment for 86mm threads, which is borderline vignetting if you're considering that. The mount on the Vazen 40mm is micro 4/3 only. This makes this lens even more niche than my own content, severely limiting its user base. On the bright side, they don't have to deal with E-mount shooters going, "How do I de-squeeze in camera?" Any proper MFT camera, and by that I mean GH5, 5S, Z-Cam, or Blackmagic Pocket 4K, offers in-camera de-squeeze and 4x3 shooting. The GH5 goes as far as offering anamorphic specific stabilization. Speaking of anamorphic, this is not a traditional 2x scope. This lens has a squeeze of 1.8 times. Why 1.8 of all numbers? Well, 1.8 times on a 4x3 sensor will stretch out to perfectly 2.4 to 1 aspect ratio, or cinemascope, while the 2x lens will give you 2.66 to 1 aspect ratio, which requires you to crop a little bit on the sides. 1.8 squeeze is to 4x3 sensors the same as 1.33 lenses to 16:9 sensors. Cinemascope machines. The downside of 1.8 times is that all cameras offer only 2 times internal D-squeeze, meaning you'll be looking at the footage a little too overstretched. The only option for proper review on set are monitors that allow you to manually control D-squeeze. The lens is readily available from Vazen's website, B&H, CVP, and other retailers for $32.50 US dollars. No eBay hunting for this one. Speaking of that, I've only seen one of these 40mm on eBay, and so far, it didn't sell for much less than a new one. Now let's get into the thick of testing. For resolution, again, I'm doing a bunch of different focus distances with diopters to assess the lens's performance over the focus range. At close focus, we can see some red fringing when wide open, although the image is pretty sharp. Corners get blurry and there's some light fall off going on. As we stop it down, light distribution improves considerably. For mid-range, around 5 feet or 1.5 meters, wide open seems less sharp and the corners lose sharpness more quickly. There's some cyan fringing on the corners too. For infinity, I see considerably inferior results across the board, which makes me think the cheap +1 diopter I was using is greatly responsible for the image quality loss moving away from the center. I'd say the sweet spot for this lens is around f4, although performance at faster apertures isn't bad. Vazen's flares are nice and blue, super sci-fi, and they have a handful of streaks. You can also see the teal mirrored flares, which are a reflection from the focusing glass. Starting with bokeh on both edges of the frame shows that there's some cat eye or bean shapes going on in these areas. But as soon as the out of focus highlights hit center frame, they look smooth and have a great shape. In a future video, I'll go over what causes bean shapes and cat eyes. Distortion is pretty pronounced, which I like, especially considering this is a crop sensor. See how the center pops out compared to the edges? This is a strong anamorphic trait, and it adds a lot to the look. Here's the Lomo Photon A. It's a giant 2x anamorphic zoom, and I set it to 40mm onto the GH5 so we could compare it to the Vazen. Forgive my bad framing, the Photon is super heavy, so I ended up giving Ari a bit too much headroom. When we switch to the Vazen, we see it's actually much wider than the Lomo. We can also see that the Vazen is much more neutral and contrasty than the Lomo. Then, I put the Photon on the A7S II and freelanced the Vazen over the mount to see how much it covers and how the field of view compares on full frame. The Vazen doesn't come close to a 2.4:1 crop on full frame, but there's enough for Super 35 coverage. The field of view difference is easier to understand here too. It just feels wider overall. On the Siri review, I did a squeeze variation test, checking the stretch factor over the focus range. The Vazen uses a different focusing mechanism based around a variable diopter. This ensures that the squeeze will remain constant through the range. The side effect of variable diopters is they tend to have a slight wide angle effect when comparing the frame at minimum focus and infinity. The Vazen is no exception, and the field of view at close focus is the same as having a 0.9 times wide angle adapter. I still find it a little odd to make such an expensive lens for such a small mount ecosystem as Micro Four Thirds. If you really think about it, the lens is more expensive than any of the cameras it mounts to. Even the Super 35 Z Cam with MFT mount costs shy of $3,000. Still, Vazen seems to be doing alright, which I admire. Footage recently started coming up about their 28mm, which shows some big differences from the 40mm design, and I'm very curious to test it out too. I love the build quality, and the images it delivers are pretty clean, almost requiring some extra filters to dirty it up a bit. I think the only limiting factor to making this lens a true hit is its mount. Even supporting other mirrorless mounts would do wonders in terms of user base. I'm not talking about EF mount, which again is out of the question because of flange distance, but E mounts and X mounts, which have shorter flanges than MFT. Michael Della Pola in New York is a big advocate for the Vazen lenses. And if you want to see some more footage of these guys, be sure to check his channel. Before you go, please hit the like button, and if you're not subscribed yet, but anamorphic is something you obsess about, or it's something that you really want to learn more, make sure to subscribe now. 2020 is going to be a great year, and I'm just getting started. If you have any questions, shoot them in the comments below and I'll get back to you. Otherwise, I'll see you next week. Tjute out. So you made it to the end. You might have noticed that there's some strange parts in this video in terms of sound, especially when I say the name of the lens. And that's because I recorded the whole video saying Vazen. And then after, I sent an email to them asking how the name is actually pronounced. And they replied saying it's Vazen. So I did a bunch of dubbing, and that's how we got here. Just so you know. Fun times in a YouTuber's life. Bye.